Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel Ruby, and we have a special guest today. We're going to be talking about something that is very important in healing from divorce, and that is detachment, and why that might be the missing piece in your healing journey. So stay tuned, because at the end, our guest is going to give us some action that we can actually take to set this all in motion. My guest today is Maggie Kelly, and Maggie is an energy healer, meditation teacher, spiritual counselor, and a life and business coach, and the founder of Satsang House Meditation and Spiritual Center here in San Diego. She created Satsang House based on her own healing journey, and her mission is to help people from all over the world cultivate emotional well-being, increase their capacity to love and care for others, and participate in the creation of a more interconnected and compassionate world. Beautiful. Over the past 3 decades, Maggie has studied with top meditation experts, including Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Alberto Villoldo, and the Incan shamans of the Andes. Recently, Maggie has immersed herself with the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, love him, who complements her teaching and practice of meditation and the energy healing side of her work. Maggie considers herself extremely blessed to marry her 18 years of meditation practice with her personal experiences into her life's work at Satsang House. And I am so happy to have Maggie here today. So welcome to the podcast, Maggie, and thank you for being here today.
Oh, Rachel, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. It's wonderful. So let's kind of break this apart. Why don't you start by telling us what it means to detach and how that sits in relation to somebody who's healing from a trauma like divorce?
Well, I think it's important to begin by maybe distinguishing the difference between detachment and unattachment, because it's very important and they're very different. Detachment is often what people arrive at when they've become emotionally overwhelmed or disappointed. And it's sort of a self-protection that kind of kicks in. And it can feel a little bit like we're stepping back, but with a kind of emotional closing. So there's usually a subtle, or maybe not so subtle, withdrawal of our care or our investment in someone else or something else, like even an event, or maybe you've put a intention out there. And there's a difference between detaching and being unattached. And at its extreme, detachment can start to become numbness or avoidance, or like, I don't really care anymore, sort of as a defense against the hurt. And detachment can be super healthy when it means that we're not reacting impulsively, but it can also be a way of shutting down connection in order for us to feel safe. Now, unattachment, on the other hand, is more internally spacious. It's the ability to stay open and engaged and present without gripping the outcome. In Buddhism, they say they have the three poisons, one of which is clinging and grasping. And so when we find ourselves holding on to something, and like going back to that example of maybe planting a seed of an intention, and like, it's gotta happen. It has to happen this way. If we're clinging and grasping to the outcome, I can almost guarantee you it won't come true. It won't happen, right? So in unattachment, you still care, you still feel, and you still show up. But your sense of well-being isn't completely dependent on how things turn out. And So where detachment sort of says, I'm stepping away so I don't feel this. Unattachment says, I can be here fully without needing to control the outcome. So a simple way to look at it is kind of like detachment reduces the emotional contact, and unattachment removes the emotional clinging, not the emotional presence. It's not like you don't care. It's just like you've made a commitment, but you're going to let go of the outcome. You're not going to get in the way of how it turns out. And that's that clinging thing, right? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about detachment versus unattachment in divorce, detachment is pretty much misunderstood when we're talking about it in terms of divorce, because people assume that if I detach, it means I don't care, or that I'm just being pulled. But in reality, it's usually a psychological protection mechanism. Because our central nervous system and our autonomic nervous system combined together in a state of high stress can only take so much. We have what's called a window of tolerance in our central nervous system. And every time that central nervous system gets hit by a trauma, say divorce or a death or a loss of a job or whatever, our central nervous system and that window of tolerance takes a hit. And so it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. So in divorce, detachment allows us to psychologically show up in a way that keeps that window of tolerance from collapsing, and allows that when a bond is ending or a threat of it ending, like maybe it's a separation on the way to divorce or it's the actual divorce, being able to detach typically starts in a way to survive that emotional overload. The nervous system can't stay in that constant state of attachment and distress. And in divorce or loss of any kind, that looks like grief or anger or bargaining or fear. How am I going to survive if I have to move out? How am I going to pay the mortgage? What's going to happen with the kids? Do we have to go to court? Can we get this done through a marital settlement agreement? Whatever it is, all that's going on. And so detachment is a way for us to manage all of that without burning out. So it can sort of look like you decide, I'm going to stop initiating emotional conversations with my potential ex. It could look like you're being maybe less reactive to something they say or something they do. It can also look like that you're starting to think more in practical terms. Like instead of the fear, you're looking at the logistics, the finances, the timelines, the children's schedules, that sort of thing. And when we detach, we can sometimes feel kind of flat or distant about the things that used to hit us really hard. And that's a psychological way to keep our mind from flooding with all that emotion and all that stress. And on the surface, it can sometimes look like strength and clarity. And sometimes it is. But there are a few different forms of detachment in divorce that matter a lot. And I think if it's okay, I could talk a little bit about them. There's, I think, maybe a few of them. There's like protective detachment, and that's a really healthy phase. That's when you're still emotionally connected, but you're able to create a little distance and you can function better. You're not bedridden and crying all day or stop eating or stop connecting with your friends or that sort of thing. You're not abandoning your feelings. You're instead regulating them. right? Instead of allowing the feeling to take hold of you and drag you down, you're able to regulate them a little bit better. There's still the grief underneath.
Right.
The grief isn't going anywhere until it's processed, right? But you're not letting it run your entire nervous system. And that's the key. And this version kind of looks like I care, but I can't stay in this emotional cycle anymore. It's not good for me.
Can I ask you a question? So just listening to you describe this protective attachment, but just detachment in general, it sounds like, would you say that there's conscious detachment where you tell yourself, I can't handle this, so I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to maybe not react next time my former spouse says something, and I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm going to be bullied or whatever it is. And then also it seems like there's some kind of an unconscious detachment where you just do it naturally to protect yourself, like I guess what you're talking about. And it's not something you've thought about, and you maybe don't even know it has a name, right?
And I love that. That's a perfect segue into another type of detachment, right? That one is more like defensive detachment.
Okay.
It can also look like an emotional shutdown. It's sort of where the system goes further and starts to reduce emotional access altogether. It's your mind's way to protect your system from flooding.
Okay.
Emotionally, psychologically, mentally. And it's not just to the other person, but sometimes to your own feelings, being able to reduce that. It can come from, when you're repeatedly hurt, or like you said, I'm not going to allow myself to be bullied, or, I'm just not going to entertain this dialogue with you anymore. Right. It can also come from betrayals or exhaustion, sheer exhaustion, right? Because when you're going through divorce, it's one of the most stressful periods of anyone's life. Beyond losing a job or losing a child, divorce ranks way up there at the top of the line of stressors in our lifetime. So exhaustion is not far out of the realm.
Right.
Especially when you have kids, right?
True. So I have a question. If you are detaching in that kind of unconscious way where you're just doing it to not experience this fear or this stress or all these emotions, these overwhelming emotions that you go through when you're going through divorce, is there a possible outcome that you're actually doing something that could hurt you later because you're not dealing with the feelings? Does that get mixed in there?
Great question. That's a fabulous question, because there's another type of detachment as well, that overwhelm response. It's literally when the emotional load is just too high for just too long, and the mind actually steps you back so that you don't have to be fully engaged anymore. And people sometimes describe that feeling like they're observing their life rather than living it. It's not intentional, but it's proactive. But what you're pointing to is, if I go into that disassociated detachment, will I miss processing? I think that's what you're asking, right?
Yes.
Well,
because that's such a big part of healing, is you have to feel the feelings and process. Yeah, exactly.
But when we can't do that, though, if the window of tolerance has collapsed, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like, I can't do it anymore. And your mind knows better than to allow you to continually stay on high alert and get flooded. And so in this sort of disassociated detachment, that's a protection for you. And ultimately, you will come around and come back online and be able to deal with it. Because, like I said, and I'm sure everyone knows, grief isn't going anywhere. if you don't process it, it will show up. It may not show up tomorrow. It may not show up for 10 years, but you can't dance around it or bypass it at all. And some people like to say, and our culture does not support grief. It just doesn't.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But also I've spoken about this in other podcasts as well. There's really a difference between men and women in processing grief too. And it's because of all the messages we are given when we're children growing up, which is changing a little bit now. But, for men, at least in our generation, it was always, you be a man, you don't cry, you're not a sissy, just move forward, keep going. And for the women, it was kind of a very different message, right? And so women tend to be more, especially when they get together with their girlfriends, to let it out and to cry it out and to all those things, but not always. I mean, I've had a lot of clients who don't do that at all. But men, I think in general, I would say, really forego that processing because they think that if they just jump back on the horse and they keep going, that everything will work out. But in the long run, like you said, the grief just stays buried, and it's like almost like an abused child or someone who suffered in childhood in different ways, and they've never dealt with it, and it's just down there. And then when you get a divorce, all of a sudden this stuff starts coming up. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in because I think it's so important when you realize that if you realize that you're maybe doing this to protect yourself, trying to detach, trying to, pull yourself out of certain situations so you don't get more hurt, so your grief isn't more, so you're not, unable to function, that you are actually, if you get back to it, that's great. Or if somebody helps you. And that's why I think divorce healing you really need a guide. But if you can do it on your own and you get to the point where you know that or if you know when you're doing it, that at some point in time, I'm going to have to deal with this, great. But I think some people, I guess my point in all this was, may not ever deal with it and may just keep going forward. So.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points. Or they think they're moving forward, but instead they reach for something to cover over the pain.
Yeah.
Right? Because it could easily be binge watching Netflix. It could be shopping online for things you don't need. It could be drinking to excess, eating to excess, smoking. And
it can be going out and dating, and then you find the same partner with a different name and a different face because you haven't done the healing work. So.
Yes. And that right there is a really valuable point, because we're not just talking about healing from the divorce, the act of marriage and divorce and the act of splitting. We're actually healing from the bond of attachment between us and our partner. And that is a full-on central nervous system attachment. So as we talk about detachment and unattachment, part of this conversation has to come in with how we are psychologically and nervous system wise attached and bonded to this other person. And so when you say, yeah, maybe go out dating and you find the same person, that's definitely indicative of I'd rather just keep bypassing the pain, whether it's through dating or drinking or whatever, and not really process the grief of this separation or severing of this relationship, but also this attachment bond I have with this person. So it can get very complex if you're not paying attention. And so detachment often emerges because that attachment is still active, but it's painful. And so it's not the absence of caring when we talk about detachment. It's the management of the caring that hurts too much for us to be able to hold the full intensity of it.
Okay.
And that's why people can feel like 1 week I'm fine. I'm calm. I'm fine. I think I'm doing great. And the next week I'm flooded.
Excellent.
And, 1 week I'm over it, and then the next minute I am grief stricken. 1 week I'm clear. This is the right choice. Next week I am emotionally completely tethered to this person. And that's not inconsistency. And this is where people really need to bring self-compassion, because this is normal behavior as we try to detach.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with you if you're going like that. If 1 minute you feel sure and the next minute you're like, what am I doing? Right? And that's not inconsistency. That's your nervous system trying to renegotiate that connection. And that's what's important, is taking care of our nervous system.
So how do we do that? If I'm a woman and I'm starting the healing process and I'm going through these emotions and I'm trying to protect myself, and how do I recognize detachment and learn to use it in the positive way that can actually bring me that emotional freedom?
Interesting question as well, right? Because in divorce, we will know we're healing in answer exactly to that question when it feels more like, I can still love you and I can still grieve and grieve our history, but I'm no longer internally bound to the outcome of your response as my former partner, right? And that's when you'll feel it in your body. A lot of us, I'm sure in this day and age, are more and more familiar with a somatic response. Or if you're in therapy ever, your therapist may say to you or ask you, where do you feel that in your body? To bring awareness to our physical body. Because your physical body is going to tell you everything you need to know about where you stand in this process, right?
Yes.
Because he calls, you pick up the phone. Early in the process, your heart's racing, your stomach drops, you've got your dukes up, ready for the fight or the protection, or you're gonna zip it so that you don't add anything. That's a fight, flight, freeze response. That's a protection mechanism to keep your nervous system and you safe. Maybe later on in the process, he calls and you're like, hi, how's it going? And nothing happens in your body, night and day, or something in the middle as you're healing, right? But your body will tell you everything you need to know if you pay attention, right? That's the key, right? Paying attention.
Yep. So true.
Yeah.
So true. So we need to start by really paying attention. And I think we were talking about this before we started shooting this episode about how important it is to write these things down, right? And have a journal and notice, because I know for me, when I was going through my divorce, when after he moved out and I was kind of getting the house ready to sell and going through all of this and started my own healing work, I felt everything manifested in my gut. So, I ended up losing 20 pounds because I was just walking 6 to 7 miles a day and I was just processing everything and not eating very much. I know it wasn't, I was very careful, but yeah, and it just, I called it my shedding period because I really just, yeah. So to be aware of that is so important, and write it down, because you can go back in those times where you do maybe feel again like, oh no, I'm having a bad day, bad week, whatever it is. And I don't think I'm healing. I think, oh gosh, how am I going to ever get out of this? But you can go back and read what you wrote down about that time when you, I don't know, had a great day and you maybe had a phone call with him and you were able to like you said, not let yourself get, in this fight or flight, this angst, this nervousness, this whatever it is. And when you read that and you realize and you're having a bad day, it really helps because you realize, wow, I can have good moments. And that means that I'm going to eventually have more good moments than I do bad moments. And it's normal to I call it a backslide. It's normal to have the backslide and have, the bad moment or the bad day or the bad week or whatever it is. And eventually you'll move on and you'll have another good moment. And then eventually in time, you'll start having more good than bad. Like you said, you might get on a phone call down the road and not be affected by anything. So it's great to write it down. I think it's really important.
I think it's really important what you just said, because no healing, not a single bit of healing, doesn't matter if it's divorce or something else. No healing happens on a linear timeline or your timeline either, right? Mm-hmm. All of healing and all of your spiritual evolution and awakening are completely nonlinear, completely. So there will be moments where you feel strong and capable and I got this and powerful. You'll come back into your power and you'll go, yep, this was a good choice, even though it wasn't my choice, or maybe it was, doesn't matter. And I don't know that I would necessarily call it backsliding when you have a bad day, because all of it's healing. And in order for us to get to a place of being unattached to it, having this simple phone call, maybe even becoming best friends with your ex, like I have been for the past 14 years I've been divorced. We're better friends now than we were when we were married.
You're so lucky. I feel like that's wonderful. Yeah.
But my point is what you're alluding to is integration.
Right. That's true.
Process grief, sadness, loss, all of it. We ultimately move to a place of integration. Mm-hmm. And in that process of processing and moving towards integration, we're going to be back and forth and all over the map. And one day I'm flooded and one day I'm empowered. And that's just what healing looks like. We have this crazy perception in our society that, we've been taught this our whole lives. You go to kindergarten, then you go to first grade, then you go to second grade, and one thing compounds and adds on to the next. Doesn't happen this way in healing or in your spiritual journey. It just doesn't. There's no end, and no one's going to give you a gold star on your forehead. There's no place to go. There's nothing to do except just do what you're doing, right? And understand that the healing journey is never going to show up the way you think it is. It just isn't. You will get knocked off your feet more than once.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It is an interesting journey, and everybody's journey is very different. And I always find it interesting when I have clients say to me, well, how long is it going to take to heal? Right. And I say, we can't focus on how long it's going to take to heal, because we'll never heal that way. There's no, like you said, it's not linear. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I kind of chuckled because I wrote an article entitled Healing is Not Linear, and healing from divorce isn't linear. And then you and the last guest I interviewed both mentioned that. So it was, it's a truth that a lot of people don't realize or don't want to realize. But we just have to keep on doing the work and moving forward. And like I said, many times, people need help because we're not told what happens when we get divorced. No one prepares us for that. Even if you've had parents or people in your family who have divorced, you are not yourself prepared for that emotional overload, for those changes, for that fear that grips you sometimes and feels like it's never going to let go. And there's no preparation. So you just have to sometimes have some guidance so you know the direction to take in processing some of the emotions and where to go from there.
Yeah. I would recommend as a reflection And that you go back and you sort of consider a major positive change from your past and see what you did to move through it and how you got there. How did you make the change? How did you get there? And how did you detach from the habits that kept the hurt or the disappointment or the grief in play? And just as a little reminder to yourself, especially on those days when you're feeling really not so powerful, to remind yourself, I got this. I can do this. And I don't have to do it tomorrow. And I can give myself grace. I can give myself self-compassion. And I can allow the process to unfold. And it will. You will get through this. You will.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. I know I read something you wrote that you sent out to your people who are on your email list, and it was really beautiful. And you talked about an exercise to start being able to learn how to detach in a positive way. And I wondered if you could talk about that and what the steps are.
Yeah, earlier we talked about how some people avoid or bypass pain in a myriad of different ways. And, any kind of addiction is not about the substance to which we're addicted. It's about the pain that's underneath. Nobody chooses to become an alcoholic or a drug addict. It's not about willpower. It's about unresolved grief or unresolved trauma or unresolved loss or something under the surface that we don't want to deal with. So one of the things that might be helpful is to sit and write a list of some of those destructive habits, or maybe there's some addiction there, or some destructive emotions that you might want to detach from. For me, let's just say, I remember for me, it was sugar. It was pints of Haagen-Dazs for months. And I knew it wasn't good. Did that stop me from buying another pint the next day? No. Okay, I won't have it in the house. So then you get in the car at 7:00 at night and go down and buy one because you didn't buy it when you were at the store earlier. So you still sabotage your own effort to stop the addictive pattern. The reason I suggest this is because once we bring awareness to the addiction, the destructive habit, the destructive emotion, if we can slowly stop that behavior, what will surface with any addiction that anyone stops, what will surface is the unresolved pain, the unresolved grief, the unresolved loss, trauma, whatever it is. And so in order for us to process and fully integrate, like we were talking about earlier, we have to walk through the eye of the needle. We have to go through the pain, right? There's shadow work and there's light work. And many of us, and in my years of working with people, I have seen this over and over and over again. People thinking, well, I'll just learn how to meditate. My life will get a lot better. And yes, that's true. Don't get me wrong. I teach meditation. I've been meditating for 18 years. But just because you get on a spiritual path, you start reading a bunch of texts, you listen to Dharma talks, you go to retreats with Eckhart Tolle or whatever, it doesn't mean by any stretch that pain is going to go away and you don't have to deal with it. And so making this kind of list brings awareness to my patterns of behavior, my emotions, the way I self-sabotage. But also, there's no way to change something that we don't notice, right? So we got to notice it before we can make a change. And once we start to make that change and we look at those addictions or patterns of behavior, I can guarantee you, and this is the little caveat, I can guarantee you all of that unresolved stuff will start to bubble up. And then you're going to face yourself. And that's the work, as opposed to spiritually bypassing or thinking you can, or in some cases, sexually bypassing, or bypassing through food, through shopping, through whatever. Once we stop that, you will be confronted with the actual issue you keep avoiding. And as an energy healer, I see this in my clients when they're on the table and I'm doing energy healing. It manifests in your physical body if you don't manage it on the outside. Once it hits your energetic body and you don't clear it from your energetic body, it will land in your physical body somewhere. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, people who have heart issues, heart disease, heart issues, that's unresolved grief. That's where grief resides, is in your heart. And that's not woo-woo. That's reality. That is what happens. Your body will absorb whatever energy you're not clearing. Mm. So the list is a start. It's just a start to bring awareness to what do we do? What am I doing? I'm doing the sabotage lifestyle. What could I be doing differently? And once we start addressing the habit, then maybe we can start addressing the pain that's underneath the addiction.
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh my goodness. So much. This is there's so much information here. I feel like people might have to watch this episode or listen twice because, and take notes, because you've really given us a lot of food for thought. And I thank you for that. Is there anything else you would like to discuss or bring up before we end? Yeah.
Just one metaphor that's helpful, I think, especially if let's just say somebody on here or watching us is wanting to plant a seed of some sort of intention. So if we're going to plant a seed of an intention, we don't go out there every day and dig it up to see if it's starting to sprout. We don't interfere with the intention. And that relates completely to attachment and detachment. Because if I want to manifest something, I need to plant the seeds of intention out there in the universe and allow the universe to do what she does. Allow Mother Earth to make that seed sprout or not. I could put up 10 tulip bulbs and maybe 8 make it. So we never know what the outcome is. And we need to step back from trying to control the outcome.
Yes.
And sometimes it's about just accepting what is and trusting that it's all going to work out in your greatest good. Because it always does. It really always does. We're the ones who get in the way. We're the ones who think we can manage it, cajole it, make it go our way. We just have to sometimes just get out of the way.
Yes, I agree with that. And that's so well said. I think sometimes when we're in the throes of the fear and the grief, that we don't, we know this, I think intuitively, most of us know that things are going to go the way they go and that we can't control them. We can try to become the best version of ourselves so that hopefully the outcome that we want will happen, but we still can't control that. So it's good to be reminded of that. And, thank you for pointing that out.
And in the case of divorce or anything else we do, that doesn't mean you lay down and let things roll over you without doing what there is for you to do, right? So you're talking about splitting assets and who gets the house and who's going to buy who out and how are we going to pay the credit cards and how many days a week do you get the children? It doesn't mean you don't stand up for what you know you deserve and what you need, right? But it does mean that once you do that, that you step back and you let go. You detach from the outcome. And you walk away knowing I did all there was for me to do in this moment. And I'm okay with that. That's it right there. Right?
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. Wow. Yeah. You've been a wonderful guest. There's so much. I can't wait to go back and listen to this again and just you really brought up some important things and especially I think being able to recognize feelings, actions, and the inability to control the outcome. And so, and just to keep on working and meet yourself.
And grace and self-compassion. Women are not very good at the self-compassion piece.
Mm-hmm. True.
So, remind yourself you're on a path. It's going to work out, and do the best that you can do. And that's all there is to do. And it's okay if you have days where you don't want to get out of bed. That doesn't mean you went backwards. It just means that's part of the healing journey. And it's okay to check out for the day. As long as it's not, 20 straight days. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a point where if you've done all you can do, and that's all you can do. You can't push. There's no magic button that you can push that's going to let you do more. And so I love that idea of just recognizing that and stepping back and just trusting that there is a path for you. There's a path, and it's making itself present, but sometimes it maybe you can see a little bit of it, a step, and the rest will come in when it comes, and you can't force that. So,
and grief is real, and grief is real. Bypass grief.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, if you want to, just know intellectually and in your bones and in your body. If you bypass it today, you'll have to deal with it at some other point.
Right.
That's what you do. That's your choice. Either choice is valid, but you can't escape it.
Mm-hmm. True. Wow. Thank you, Maggie. You've been a wonderful guest. I'm really happy that we connected, and you got to come onto the show. And again, you've just really given us a lot to think about. And I love that, because that's what it's all about, right? And I will have all the links where the viewers and listeners can reach Maggie, find her. If you need some energy healing work, if you're in the area and you want to try a meditation group, or do you do that online as well?
Not anymore. Not anymore.
COVID. So not since COVID. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But I encourage you, if you are in the area, if you come to visit in the area, that you go check it out and learn more about Maggie through the links that we'll have up. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Maggie, so much for being here today. It's really been an honor. And for those women who are healing from divorce, starting the divorce healing journey, or thinking about, or maybe just going through it and getting ready, just know that you are not alone. This is a safe space. I try to bring wonderful guests on here like Maggie so that we can talk about important parts of your healing journey and important things that you can do and try so that you can heal and start healing. And if you like the show, please do me the honor of subscribing, commenting, and sharing, because you never know when there might be someone else who might need to hear what we talked about today in this episode or in other episodes. So thank you for being here. Thank you again, Maggie. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care.